let's start with how I chose today's book. I judged it by its cover. I honestly knew nothing about this book. It was showing up on some feeds here and there, just all over online here and there and whatnot, and people's things. So, and I thought the cover was beautiful. Seriously, this cover is great. It's one of the best covers I've ever seen for a book. It's beautiful. The composition is great. The title is enticing, but I've been seeing a lot of titles like that lately. This, a something of something and something. I'm not going to let that deter from how good of a book it actually is or not. But I've just been seeing that a lot lately. It's a trend right now. But just this cover was beautiful. And I essentially chose to read it because I saw the cover. I know a lot of people say, well, don't judge a book by its cover. You never know what's inside. And I agree. But as a graphic designer and a marketer in my life and in my profession, a cover is a starting point. It's that point of drawing somebody in, saying, is this going to be worth my time? Well, if it's enough to capture your attention, and it's the good kind of attention and it doesn't repel you, then it gets you to step up, pick up the book, look at it closer, read the blurb on the back or in the flap. And if that's a good blurb and it's a good enough premise, then you move on to maybe you read a couple of pages, maybe you read a chapter, and then you buy the book, you check it out from the library, whatever, and you read it. But basically all I really technically went off was the cover. I can't even remember really reading a blurb for it. I'm sure I did. Probably was the most bare bones of blurbs, but I read it and I loved it. This book is terrific. If you want to put it on a star scale, which I did on Goodreads, I gave it a 4. There's just a couple things that kept it from being a 5, and we'll discuss that here in a second. But ultimately, this is a good book. A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanna A. Brown. Sorry if I said the name wrong. I'm terrible with names. It's just kind of me. But it's a terrific book. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. The lore is amazing. The characters are really well flushed out and everything. Basically, the story is that I'll put it in basic terms, and I won't say names or spoil anything. But some refugees come to this big capital city, and one of their siblings gets captured by a spirit of some kind, and this spirit, to release their sibling, they give a mission of assassinating the princess. And then on the opposite side, you have the princess, who, in order to save one of her family members, needs somebody to sacrifice in order to essentially resurrect one of her loved ones. And now those two characters are on a collision course with each other. That's the very basic bare bones of it. I recommend you look at it, you read the blurb, and read the book. It's a terrific book. I'll try and just, I'm showering praise on it right now because I just finished reading it and it's stuck in my mind, and I'm really sad that it's over. I think a good book is one that when you end it, you're either very satisfied with how it ended, you're like, that was a good read, a fun read. As an author myself, that's what I try to do. I just want people to enjoy what they read, and end up putting it down and saying, that was fun. That's what I want. Or you want people to put it down and say, man, I missed that book. I want to go back. I want to go back to that world. I want to meet these characters. I want to dive in deeper. As I approached the end of it, I realized, oh my gosh, it's not going to wrap up nice, neat, in a bow. It means it's probably going to be part of a series, so it's the first book, and now I'm going to have to wait. That's disappointing, not because the book or the ending is disappointing, but because I have to wait. But, that creates anticipation for the next book, and I certainly hope she writes it quickly, gets published quickly, and I get to revisit the world. The characters were they're really real in a lot of ways. There is some elements of depression and anxiety and self-harm in this book. It's small, but it is there. So if that's kind of a trigger thing for you, just be careful about that. I don't think that's any reason to steer clear of the book, but it's there, so beware. The characters were not perfect, and that's good. That's a good thing because they had flaws. They had character flaws. They had emotions. They had struggles. Nobody was just the super awesome Uber character. I didn't feel like any of them were caricatures of anybody. They were very unique, and the author did a very good job of fleshing them out, especially putting them in the situations that they were in, going forward through the book. My complaint, I'll try and do praise and a little bit of complaint, or I wish. It's not really complaint. It's more like I wish this had been, or I wish this were a little bit better. My only issue I guess I would have is that I wanted a little bit more. I want a little bit more of those characters, a little bit more of their backstory. Now, if this is going to be a series, the next book may add to that, and that's great. That's wonderful. I can wait for that. But in this book, I wish there had just been a little bit more for some of these characters and some of the situations they had been in and some of their past. Just a little more fleshed out. This book clocks in at a little over, not quite 500 pages. Not quite 500 pages. I feel like she could have added 100 more pages. Maybe that's being a little bit much, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more in there to really bring out some more of the characters. The two main characters, they get fleshed out pretty well. It's some of the other side characters that are still important that don't get fleshed out as well. And I wish I'd gotten a little bit more of them. The world that it exists in, I won't even try and say names because these are foreign names and things, and I don't want to sound stupid, quite honestly, and I don't want to butcher them. But it's definitely a Far Eastern type culture, and I hope I'm saying that right. And it's just really unique and interesting. The lore, the gods, the magic that she infuses into it, and that people have to interact with. It's just really well done, and it's very interesting. Again, my one critique on that would be that a little of it didn't quite make sense. There's this idea kind of popular among the people that magic doesn't actually exist, or if it did, it doesn't anymore. And there's reasons for that that kind of get revealed in the book, but it doesn't delve too deeply into that, because when suddenly magic is introduced, it's kind of like, oh, I didn't think that existed. Oh, well, now it exists, and they just kind of jump on, move on. So that's where I say this could have been fleshed out just a little bit better. We could have been given a little more feeling, a little more reaction from some of the characters as to this magic happening. Also, in a couple of places in the book, again, it seems like magic's not supposed to work in this place, and people don't think it actually exists or have kind of forgotten it, or it's kind of like a religious mysticism sort of thing and not an actual thing that happens. But they have some places where stuff happens, some events happen that are magical in nature, but nobody addresses the idea that, well, that's magic, or that's some sort of magic, and they're just like, yeah, that's just part of the thing. So that was a little confusing. Maybe I just missed it. Maybe I didn't quite get it. Again, it could have been fleshed out just a little bit more, giving me a little bit more detail. The pacing of the book was really well done. The first chapter starts a little slow, but then it ramps up quickly, and then you get introduced to the next character. It's an alternating POVs. So you have two POVs. You have the refugee and you have the princess, and it alters between the two the whole book. But the pacing is great, and it does really, really well. It gets you right there at the first chapter, and moves on from there. But again, the one critique I would have for that is every once in a while, the events just really happen. It's very quack. it's not very quack. It's very quick. It's just you'll be suddenly doing something and then something happens. Where I feel like there could have been just a little bit better of a transition going into that event. I know sometimes in life things just suddenly happen. You're driving along and you have a car wreck. Whatever. It's things do just happen, so that's okay. But every few times it just kind of was jarring. Other than that, really the only other complaints I have are very minuscule, or I say complaints, critiques. They're not complaints because I don't really have any complaints about this book. They're just small critiques as a reader and a writer myself. The main critiques I have for it are, again, those, as I just said before, the pacing of it was really well done, but in a few places, events just kind of suddenly happen. It's very jarring, and I don't feel like I got enough information or detail flushing that situation out. It just kind of glossed over it really quickly, where I'm like, this could have been better. Like, why didn't you, just one more chapter, like 3 or 4 more pages for this? Why didn't you give me half a page more of what was going on, what led up to that, what was the sudden inciting incident, what were the feelings? It just kind of, there were a few jumpy points like that. Not bad, just points I noticed in particular. This is probably the biggest critique I have of it, and this isn't anything against the author by any means. It's just that there were a few places where there were phrasings and words used that I don't think fit the world. As an author, when you're writing, especially when you're writing a completely different world, a fictional world, or whatever, you're going to have specific slang, specific terms, specific metaphors and similes and things like that. And it's imperative to keep that immersion within that book for the reader to make sure that everything fits. And there were just a few places in the book that some things were said by the characters or thought by the characters, and it didn't fit. For instance, this is in a far, Middle Eastern type setting, and it's an ancient type world, and one of the characters says, well, I thought it was cool. And I'm like, that just didn't fit for me, especially since it was never said again in the entire book. And so I could forgive something if it's set up to be in that world, but when it's only said once, it kind of breaks the illusion. There were just a couple other places like that in the book that, and again, it wasn't a ton by any means. There was just a few places that it broke the immersion for me because it didn't fit the world. And that's hard to do. It's easy to get caught up as you're writing and just using something that and put it down and forget. Maybe you plan on going back and changing it, or you just don't even think about it because it's so ingrained into our own psyche that you don't even think about it. But that's where editors and beta readers are supposed to come in and help you out. And I suppose that's my next critique. Other than those two things, really, this book was excellent. And I think that's the only two things that really kept me from giving it a 5-star. I would say I would give it a 4.5, really. Those critiques are just small. She's a debut writer. This is her debut novel. It's awesome. It's a hit as far as I'm concerned. But the last critique I have is really not on the author. It's on the editor. There were several places in this book that there were misspellings of words. and just there were editing errors in this book. There were words that were specific to the book that got spelled wrong in one spot. There was a repeating of words at one point. I might even be able to find it. Can't find it. But it was in there that it just kind of repeated words. It's one of those things like you say it and you accidentally, maybe you copy and pasted something or whatever. There were just a few places like that. Now, pretty much every book I've ever read, I think I've found it or seen, just in my experience, at least one typo or one error. And books are hard. Whether you're doing it all by yourself or you have a team. My first book that I wrote, and I self-published, I pretty much did everything. And I did get a couple of beta readers out there to kind of give me some feedback, and I also farmed it out to have somebody edit it for me, and they did some editing. And then, of course, I did a print version of it and went through it all myself and reread it and edited it, did all the things. And even then, after I thought I'd had it perfect and I'd done it, all these things, and I'd done it 2, 3, 4 times, I printed it out and I sent it out, and then I found a couple of other errors later on when I was doing something. And so I had to correct those, and I re-uploaded it. So mistakes happen. Even if you have a giant team of super knowledgeable people behind it and editors doing it, mistakes will happen. But I just feel like there were like several mistakes in this, and I don't know if I don't think it's the author's fault by any means. The author does everything that they possibly can to make a perfect manuscript, and then they hand it out to the editor. The editor makes changes and updates, and they'll, hopefully help you with fixing grammar and spelling and all those punctuation fun things. And even then, sometimes going back and forth, things get lost. You read it so many times, you just gloss over what somebody else might be able to see. As a coder myself, I'll be writing code and I'll have a problem and I won't know how to fix it. And then literally somebody who knows like 0.0001% of anything in coding, they'll come over and they'll point at, hey, is that period supposed to be there? Or I think you misspelled that. And be like, that's what it is. And it's because I've been staring at it too long. So I'll chalk it up to people were staring at this too long. Maybe they rushed through it a little bit and they shouldn't have. They didn't do a once more over. They didn't do a last minute spell check or something. Whatever. That's not a complaint for the author. That's a complaint for the publisher. I think, and I feel bad because I think every author wants their manuscript to be flawless and to be perfect. I don't think there is an existence of flawless manuscript. There's always going to be punctuation errors, there's going to be spelling errors, there's going to be some grammar, whatever. So I think in this sense, it was a disservice to the author that the editors missed these things. And I hope beyond hope, that their next print run, maybe they fix them. They go through and they're like, oh man, we found, people found these and we found them too, and we'll fix them, and second run, they'll be gone. That would be wonderful. I hope that happens. Other than that, this book was terrific. I said the cover was beautiful, and every single word inside of it is beautiful as well. Read it. read this book. Not just because it's by a black author and about black and people of color characters in a different sort of Middle Eastern type setting and things like that. Read it because it's good. Definitely support variety when it comes to reading. I'm definitely guilty of reading primarily white fantasy and whatever. Not because that's by choice, just because what I read. Sounds interesting, and if it sounds interesting to me, I'll read it. I don't really care who wrote it and or what the characters necessarily look like in the books or not. I'm all for diverse. I'm all for diverse, and this is a truly, really good book. Read it because it's good. Read it because it's great. I really had fun with it. It was really good. The twists and the turns and the narrative were excellent. The payoffs at the end, again, since I guess it definitely looks like it's going to be a series, didn't wrap up everything like I would like it to, but you know, there should be hopefully a sequel, and I look forward to that. And I'm like, oh yes. So it is a sad thing that I finished this book and I'm done with it. Now I have to wait, but I'm happy that I read it, and I look forward to reading more of what this author has to write. So again, go out and get it. Go out and read it. Get it from your library. Whatever you got to do, and enjoy the great story. So thanks for tuning in again. I have some more things planned. I've been trying to read a little bit more lately, and like I said, I'm trying to get some more diverse things instead of just so much Stephen King, which is what I've been reading lately. So I got some other things in the works that I'm doing. There's hopefully going to be something with Animorphs coming soon, so stay tuned for that. And as always, just, thanks for tuning in and watching and giving me your time. If you feel so inclined, please click subscribe, bell, whatever other thing YouTube has going on right now. And if you, again, feel so inclined, check out my debut self-published novel, A Clash of Symphonies. It's available on Kindle and Audible right now. And if you're lucky, I might have some free Audible codes for you if you request them, so we might be able to work that out. And as always, thanks for watching, and stay safe and keep reading. Thanks. Bye.